Hey students, in Unit 1.5D, we're going to be looking at the different kinds of goods, the different types of goods that will be relevant to our exploration of externalities, especially in the context of the free rider problem and other things that we'll be talking about in class. So let's go ahead and get into these four types of goods. So here's the four types of goods we'll be focusing on. There's not going to be any other slides to this. This will be the bulk of this presentation. But what we're going to focus on first is these terms here, rivalrous and excludability. All right, so what does it mean for a good to be rivalrous? What makes a good rivalrous? Well, for a good to be rivalrous, it means that there's competition for the product, or there's competition for the good. So, for example, if the store only has like five things of ramen noodles, then only the people who are willing and able to buy 5 of them are going to get it. So if I get in there and I buy a few, and then Billy Bob comes into the store and he buys the remaining ramen noodles, then no one else is able to buy them. So you must compete. You must compete in order to acquire the product or the commodity. So that's what it means by rivalrous. You have to be rivalrous in order to get the product. You have to compete in order to get the product, in order to consume it. All right. So that's rivalrous. Well, what's excludability? What does it mean for a product to be excludable? Well, think about when you go to the Six Flags. If you go to Six Flags, there's only certain rides that you can ride based on your height. So you're going to be excluded from riding certain rides if you do not meet the minimum height requirement. Well, just like at a roller coaster, in the markets, if you don't have the correct amount of money, then you are not going to be allowed to consume the product. You are going to be excluded from consumption if you do not have the amount of money needed for consumption. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about excludability and rivalry. So these two concepts, rivalry and excludability, are very important in determining what kinds of goods we're analyzing. So let's first start with the private goods. If you look here in our little chart, you'll see that private goods are both rivalrous and excludable. And this makes a lot of sense, because if you think about the many different private goods are products that are produced and sold in the private market. So if you think about like ice cream, or if you think about that clothing, or even congested toll roads, they are excludable. Why? Because you have to pay for them. If you do not have the money to pay for them, or if you have not paid for a toll tag on a toll road, for instance, then you will be excluded from those goods and services. But because these goods and services are scarce, because they're limited in supply, this also makes them rivalrous. So there's only going to be so many Adidas shirts. There's going to be so many Under Armour apparel. There's only going to be so many pints of Rocky Mountain Road Bluebell ice cream. Oh my gosh, I'm getting hungry. There's only going to be so many pints in the store. So whoever gets the pints first, they get the ice cream. And if they have the money to afford it, then they get it. If you don't have the money, or if you didn't get there in time, then you're not going to get that product. So think about congested toll roads. If the toll road has a lot of cars on it, it's very heavily a lot of traffic, then that means, one, you've already had to pay for the toll tag, so therefore you've satisfied the excludability requirement. But because of the congestion on the toll road, because of the heavy traffic, the lanes are also going to be very rivalrous for who can get into which lane and how fast they can drive. All right, so moving forward, what kind of private goods can you think of that are not included in this model? All right, I've given you 3 here: ice cream cones, clothing, and congested toll roads. What other private goods in the market do you think fit the criterion of rivalry and excludability? We will talk about that in class. So moving on into our next product, natural monopolies. All right, so naturally monopolistic products, or natural monopoly products, these are products that are excludable. So if you don't have the money, or if you don't meet a certain age requirement, then you'll be excluded from the consumption of these products. But they are not rivalrous, which means that if I'm consuming the product, my consumption of it does not prevent your consumption of it, which is the definition of rivalry. If I'm using the Kleenex, you cannot use the Kleenex. Fortunately, this principle does not apply to certain services like fire protection, cable television, uncongested toll roads, police services. These kinds of things are considered naturally monopolistic services or products. The reason being is because that, yes, you have to pay for them. Your taxes pay for fire protection. Your taxes pay for police. You have a bill that you pay. You have a monthly bill for your cable television. You have to pay for your toll road or your toll tag on the toll road. So for those reasons, naturally monopolistic products are considered excludable, but because my consumption of the product does not prevent your consumption of the product, they are non-rivalrous. For example, if I'm watching cable television, that does not prevent you from watching cable television. All right? The next good we're going to talk about is the common good or the common resource. All right? So the common resource is considered rivalrous because there is, just like in everything in reality, there are scarce supply. There's a scarce supply of fish. There's a scarce supply of clean, breathable air. There's scarce supply of non-toll roads. These kinds of things. So driving in a congested non-toll road, so like a congested I-35, for instance, you can drive on I-35 for free. It's non-excludable, all right? You didn't have to pay to acquire it. There's no height restrictions for it. There's nothing like that. So anyone who has a vehicle, anyone who can drive on I-35. However, if it's congested, if there's a lot of traffic, then that means it will be rivalrous. It means that the lanes in which you can drive, you will have to compete to get in those lanes with other cars on the highway. So a common resource is non-excludable, meaning that there are no prices or age restrictions to acquire it. However, it is rivalrous because of its degree of scarcity. So, for example, anyone could go fish in the ocean. All you need is like a net or a hook. Anything you can get your hands on, including your hands, to catch a fish. So anyone can do that. So it's not. You don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to pay to fish in the ocean. There's nothing. There's no excludability requirements like that, like you would experience in a market, for instance. However, if I catch a fish out of the ocean, by default, you cannot catch that fish. So therefore, it is still rivalrous. All right, so I give you a few examples of common resources that are not excludable but yet rivalrous, like fish in the ocean, the environment. Like you don't have to pay money to breathe air. You don't have to pay money to have trees in existence to filter out the carbon emissions in our air, things like this. But there are quite a few other billions of other people on the planet who are trying to breathe. All right, so in that sense, the amount of breathable, clean air you could consider to be rivalrous, but not excludable. All right, so moving on, the next good we're going to highlight is the public good. The public good is both not excludable and non-rivalrous. These goods are available to everyone, and there are no price restrictions or age restrictions. And if I'm using the good, it doesn't prevent you from using the good. So to give you some specific examples, like national defense, your military, if the military is defending the country, then everyone is included. So therefore, no one is excluded. So it's not excludable. But we don't have to compete. We don't have to compete with each other to see who the military will defend. The military is here to defend all of us. So therefore, it's non-rivalrous as well. You could think about knowledge in this context. Knowledge is however you can acquire it. We have libraries, we have the internet, you have cell phones, computers, you have public school, all these kinds of things. So just because you consume knowledge doesn't prevent other people from consuming knowledge. And many times the internet, Google, all these services are free. So therefore, not only are they not rivalrous, but they're also not excludable because there's no price or age restrictions typically. Uncongested non-toll roads is another great example of a public good. Because it's not a toll road, there's no excludability factor here. No one has to pay to access it. It's free to access. And because it's not congested, you can choose whatever lane you would like to drive in. So there's no competition for driving lanes. So it would be non-excludable and non-rivalrous. All right, so now that we've covered these 4 basic types of goods, try to, and after you read the chapter in the textbook, see how the free rider problem might relate to these 4 types of goods. Is there a free rider problem when it comes to private goods? Or is the free rider problem more relevant to common resources and public goods? We'll discuss this in class. See you guys next time.